Good morning, everyone. We are continuing our Ananda way of life based on the guidelines of conduct for members of the Ananda Sevaka order. Today is the first day of the week, Monday. And on this day, I remind all of you that the ministry, which I call the mission of the masters, is sustained by the financial support of those of you who find benefit from it. So if you would like to help us continue with these broadcasts, and we're doing some work translating Light Bearer, the book about Swamiji, into Italian and Spanish, and publishing in those countries, keeping it published in India, and eventually this fund will also pay for me to travel to other parts of the world, although at the moment that's on hold. You can support by signing up for Patreon, and that puts you in a regular subscription cycle. That also gives you certain benefits like access to a few classes that are otherwise paid classes, a few little details like that. Or you can go to my website, Ananda Joy. It's very obvious. You can follow the links to donate there. Thank you. I'm very grateful. Let's pray together now. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, humbly we bow at your feet. Dear Swamiji, help us to understand the consciousness behind the words that you've written, that we may feel within our hearts the inspiration to live according to the highest ideals that we can understand and aspire to achieve. We are your children. Awaken us in your light. Om, peace. Amen. We are in Article 11 of 16 articles, and as soon as we finish with this one, we're going to membership, and then, most interestingly, to the membership vows, and a few other things. So we're making our way through it. We've been in the very practical part of this, personal money, home building, how do you build a home, and now we're on property, which is actually really about housing. This article, as much as I've been able, I've tried to universalize the instructions here. But the origin of these guidelines came from the unique circumstances at life at Ananda Village. Ananda Village is the first and the most established of the Ananda communities. There's 1,000 acres of land there. Land is fully paid for. There's several hundred people who are in residence there. The community is 50 years old. And because it was bare land, it's the housing has all been constructed. All of the residences have been constructed. Whereas in the urban communities, we have taken over by lease or by purchase existing housing facilities in the form of apartment complexes. So what this section is talking about is not something that any other community so far in Ananda has had actually to deal with. And the issue has had to do, and this was from the very beginning when I was still living there in the first 16 years, is that building housing for hundreds of people is extremely expensive. And we've never taken government subsidies, and we've never had the kind of patron that had an unlimited amount of money to pour into the property. It's also developed piecemeal, just year by year doing what we can. And I talked last time about the lack of cohesive architecture, which has been one of the effects of that system. Now the architecture is more consistent, but it's more utilitarian than imaginative. It's perfectly functional and has a nice aesthetic. But each of the houses gets constructed individually at the motivation of some individual member who has the financial resources to do it. However, for reasons that may also be spiritual for the benefit of the community, but are also legal because of the way the property is held, because of the way it's zoned. Now, some of my information might be out of date, but this is what has been true. We're not a subdivision. If we were a subdivision, everybody would have their own little piece of land and you would put one house on it. We don't want to be a subdivision because, among other things, it catalyzes an enormous number of regulations that we are not, that are of no benefit to us and are of phenomenal expense. So in order not to be a subdivision, we had to be again, my information might be out of date, but multi-use function on various pieces of the property. This is the commercial, this is the industrial, this is the residential. So it's also not possible. It's not possible, nor is it at all desirable from the community point of view, for individuals to actually own the land, and nor can individuals actually own their own homes. The community can give them lifetime stewardship of that house, but they can't actually have a deed to it because of the bureaucracy of the government. This is all just kind of working out. One thing triggers another. And spiritually speaking, it's not in keeping with what we're trying to do that this is my house and that I can carve it out and I can will it to my children. And even if my children are not at all in tune with Ananda, this is still their house. There were just lots of issues. So we developed, I say we because I was there when it happened, although I never had anything to do with it. We developed a housing policy that had to do with individuals loaning money to the community for a house to be constructed, that they would have stewardship of that house, but they would never actually have ownership of that house. Ownership has to do with rights of inheritance, among other things, and if that money was loaned, there was the possibility under certain conditions as it developed where that loan could be reclaimed. But of course, because there's no open market on the houses have not necessarily appreciated. And so a house that could have been built literally for $60,000 25 years ago might take $260,000 to build now, but $60,000 was all the money that was loaned. So is the repayment on that house loan $60,000 or $260,000? And this is just a big, ongoing, oh my, we didn't realize the implications, not that the community of Ananda Village is in the process of trying to untangle. So I'm going to read this Article 11, but there's really not much I can say because there it is. No fixed property, land and buildings, in other words, may be privately owned on property that is solely held by Ananda. So if Ananda owns the property, no individual can own a piece of it, and no individual can can own a permanent structure that's placed on it. And as I said, this is partly legal and partly we're glad that it has to be that way, because otherwise the community could devolve into a neighborhood really easily, especially when inheritance starts entering the picture. And you have a bunch of, good-hearted, party-loving next generation who just ride their motorcycles up and smoke marijuana, and it's, quote, their house. That's the worst case. There's many other stages in between. Members may lend or donate to the community a sum of money for the building construction. If the sum is loaned, they have a right to be repaid if ever they should move from that Ananda community. If a loan was made, members will be repaid according to the terms of that community's housing policy. Members should carefully consider the restrictions of the housing policy before they lend money to it, A loan for housing to Ananda should not be thought of as a financial housing investment. If the person loaned money under previous policy by building their own residence, they must accept repayment in terms of the community's decision as to the present value of the home. The community, for its part, has a divine duty to be fair-minded in the estimate of the value. This paragraph was not written by Swami. It was written later when these rules were devised, when the implications of what we had set in motion became more obvious. Traditionally, said Sevaka life members, in a spirit of demonstration of renunciation, donate to the church any outstanding fixed property loans of housing interest. Traditionally, it says that. It used to be that when you became a Sevaka life member, if you had a house, you donated the house. That was part of what it meant to be a Sevaka life member, is that this is a life commitment, and I'm not going to hold this as personal property anymore. That did not prove to be a very viable policy because people changed their minds. And then the community was faced in this very awkward position where somebody who no longer felt committed to Ananda and wanted to go on and do something else, the only financial resources they had was the home, the money they'd put into the home they'd been living in. And if it had started out as a loan and been converted to a donation when they became a life member, but now they were disenchanted, the moral position of the community became quite complicated. Because yes, you could say by the letter of the law, too bad, honey, all your money's in the house and the house belongs to Ananda, good luck. But that did not feel very appropriate. So now it's written all like this, but it's still actually a work in progress. I recently heard that everybody's trying to figure out another reality on this one again. A Sevaka life member, in his heart at least, should offer everything he owns to God. The surrender of property rights need not mean, however, that he relinquishes stewardship of the home in which he lives. The community has the obligation to adequately house those who have donated their interest in property rights. And I'm just going to turn the page because even in community things get complicated. So, Article 12. Acceptance of new members of the Sevaka order. The Ananda Sevaka order is the monastic order in relation to the Ananda communities. Its membership is comprised of single people as well as householders. The reason for acceptance of a new Sevaka order member must be primarily spiritual. Consideration of his wealth, talents, or other possible contributions to the order or community's welfare must always be subordinated to his spiritual qualifications. When we were 25, A.A. Milne says when we were 6, but when we were 25, and everything was in front of us, it all seemed very simple. But as we got older, as people developed relationships, got married, had children, aged, shifted, just things that we never even thought we'd have to think about. Well, of course, we'll just take people for spiritual qualification. But then you have older people who come with well-established enterprises, well-established expectations, even well-established bank accounts. It's just like lots of pressures and other realities can sort of start being factors in making what really has to be first a spiritual decision. We are a spiritual community. The monastic order within the residential community is meant for those, and the way to put this, I'm not going to say who have the spiritual evolution, that's extremely misleading, but who have the karmic freedom is what it really comes down to. They have the freedom, just because of the particular incarnation we're living. Freed from familial ties or responsibilities, freed from compelling karmic career demands, freed from debilitating psychological or physical conditions that make it difficult or even impossible to conform to what is all these other 11 guidelines that we were talking about. So in some cases, it might be able to be evaluated from a spiritual perspective, but it's just the karmic freedom. This incarnation matches the possibility of being a Sevaka member, or especially being a life member, which is where everyone is heading. And the life member vow, as you will see, is not a small vow. It's not something you do because you have a free Saturday afternoon. You do it because this is who I want to be now and forever. And so this is reminding the members, and this is reminding the membership committee to keep in mind why we're here. A Sadhaka member, now we've just thrown in something that hasn't been mentioned before. A Sadhaka member may be invited to join the Sevaka order after a period of at least 2 years, a time fixed more by tradition than design. A Sadhaka member is like those who are deeply committed to Ananda and in residence in the community. It's like a preliminary, well, it's not preliminary always. The Sadhaka order was created in the context of our urban communities, and the Sadhaka order is the order that is most relevant to the vast number of people who are involved with Ananda. Because the Sadhaka order is entirely about your spiritual commitment, it is not about where you live. So the Sadhaka order encompasses all those people all around the world who do not have the opportunity to live in an Ananda community because there is no Ananda community in their locale. But their commitment to the spiritual path, to the Ananda way of life, is complete and deep, and maybe every bit as strong and may even be more strong than some of the Sevaka orders. But the karmic circumstances do not allow residence in the community. Responsibility for family, career, cultural accident, just where you are, and economic conditions. You may be in Serbia, you may be in Russia, you may be in Germany, you may be in Slovenia, you may be in Brazil, you may be in South Africa. We don't have communities there, but Master is everywhere. But once one is in an Ananda community, the process is, first you take the Sadhaka training, you become a Sadhaka member, and then if you are resident in a community or move to a community, you may be then invited to join the Sevaka order. The operative word here is invited, which is, it's not like you can just go and sign up. You have to be invited because the community perceives that the karmic conditions in your life support your becoming a member of the Sevaka order, and you may reject or accept as you wish. This invitation is based on the apparent spiritual growth of the individual, as well as his level of commitment to living positively and actively in an Ananda community. He must show sincerity in his love for God and his dedication to the path. Sincerity and dedication. Those are really two glorious words. Sincerity is one of the best ones. Sincerity means purity of intention. I'm not doing this so that other people will like me. I'm not doing this because everyone around me is and I want to fit in. I'm not doing this because I don't have anything better to do and I'm afraid of any other way of living, so I'm just going to try this one. Sincerity means that if I was left alone on a desert island, nobody was watching and nobody knew, I would still live according to these principles because they are who I am. And dedication means that I'm putting as much energy as I can to support my sincere understanding of the purpose of my life. And it says, expectations are not that he be a saint. So it's not like you have to be really good at it, but you have to be deeply sincere and you have to be applying all your energy to making it work. Expectations are not that he be a saint, but that he is living his life in a manner to become a saint. It's a sweet way of putting it, isn't it? It's not that you already are a saint, but you're doing everything you can to become one. And the past lives of all men are dark with many shames. So that's a quote from Sri Yukteswar from Autobiography of a Yogi. But we all know, and the rest of the quote is, but everything in future will improve if you're making a right spiritual effort now. So many times, the people who are drawn to give their lives completely to a spiritual way of living have struggled with the attraction, the temptation of other ways of living. But often those who have been knocked down by life have much stronger determination to live correctly than those who have never had to fight for what they have. Now, it doesn't have to be in this incarnation, because I remember saying to Swamiji that I had from the earliest memory, I had this fierce determination to find a way in life to be happy, to be consistently happy. And then I said to Swami, but I've never been unhappy. I've had a very happy life. No, nothing at that time. Nothing really hard had ever happened to me. And he just said, past lives. Of course, that's the answer. We go through many experiences, and those experiences drive us to seek a deeper meaning in life, and then drive us to live in accordance with the principles of that deeper meaning. So all of that is there. That, it's not that I am a saint, but I'm highly motivated to become one. In accepting this way of life, it goes without saying that he embraces all of Ananda's principles and ideals and is making them part of his life. So it's not enough to say, oh, well, I love these masters, but I don't want to meditate. Or I really like this cooperative country living, but I don't want to go to Sunday service. Who would want to go to Sunday service? And that happens. It does happen. People think they can pick and choose what they like. And when that happens, this is a great place to raise my kids. So I'm here so my kids can go to school and live in the country. No, that does not make you a Sadhaka member. That does not make you a Sevaka member. We have to embrace all of Ananda's principles and ideals. He gives service and support to his Guru Bhais and to the community through his sadhana, attitude, cooperation, and joyful participation in all of its aspects. So here we are, sadhana, attitude, cooperation, and happy participation. It says joyful participation. It's not like, well, they said I had to be here, so I'm going to be here. And you're sitting in the back and you're watching your watch and you don't really want to do it. That's not who we are. We don't. Ananda's idea of what it is to be part of Ananda is not just to show up. It's that you have to bring your energy and your positive attitude to the situation, because it's also part of our principles. You do not get anything just from sitting there. A lot of institutional religion over time begins to define what it means to be part of that religion by external things. I will recite this creed. I will attend this ceremony. I will donate this amount of money, and that makes me a good X, Y, or Z, whatever it is. That's not how Ananda works. You don't get any credit just from moving your body from spot to spot and standing where you're supposed to stand. What you have to embrace is you have to embrace sadhana, which is personal spiritual practice, attitude. That means how you regard what's going on around you. You know, it's not to say if difficulties come to you, attitude is at least the effort to recognize everything is coming to us from God, and everything is being karmically fair. If we're sitting in the midst of Ananda cultivating the attitude of a victim, whether it's the community that's not listening, the community that's not understanding, or God who's not understanding, and this is not fair, that's not the Ananda attitude. It's not that we should be doormats, but we should be genuinely interested in understanding how everything that happens to us is a consistent, positive expression of Divine Mother's will for us. And that's not so easy. And nobody expects you to be a saint. But we have to actually all be working cooperatively with the same basic ideas. So if someone trying to be helpful to you says, well, you know, everything happens. There's always an appropriate karma. What do you think the karmic lesson is in this? Karmic lesson? There's no karmic lesson. People are just behaving badly. I mean, that's not a good attitude. That's not the attitude of an Ananda member. You can say, I have no idea what is happening here. You can even say, I'm having a very hard time. I feel very angry at God. That's very sincere. Nobody's expecting you to be perfect. But we have to know where we're going and how we're going to get there. This is how Ananda can run without a tremendous number of rules for how people must behave. Because all of the guidelines are to get our energy and our attitudes in the right way. And then we can operate with what has proven to be over years an astonishing degree of harmony. Because we're all embracing the same principles and ideals. And even when we have disagreements with each other, we can go back to these fundamentals and at least have a unified understanding of how to restore harmony and understanding. And that's cooperation, that we'll work together instead of against each other, and joyful participation. That I'm here because I recognize that this is a divine privilege, and every day I embrace it in that spirit. God bless you, my friend.